if you want to get rid of the Tories, voting Labour is the most efficient way of doing that. But you still can't have a situation where you can't criticise the current Labour leader for things that you disagree on. And this is how progress is made. You know, if Labour feel like they are losing a hell of a lot of votes to the Greens because there is public opinion and people are making their voices heard, then they might shift policy further in that direction. Greetings and welcome. Now today I want to talk about how damaging Labour voters crossing over to the Greens could be for Labour winning the next election. We've seen a lot of news recently over Keir Starmer. A lot of people not happy on his take on Israel, doesn't think that he's condemning Israel's war crimes enough. And it really opened my eyes on my recent video that I just done with Steve Coogan's opinion of Keir Starmer. Steve Coogan, a lifelong Labour supporter, didn't hold back on giving his negative opinions on Keir Starmer. And in the comments of that video, well actually in that video itself, I sort of said that my viewers are generally 50-50 on Starmer when I look into the comments, whether they're pro-Starmer or anti-Starmer. But that's changed. I think the tide has changed. Whether I just enticed more people to that video that are anti-Starmer, but if you look at the comments of that video, I think it's about 70-30 in favour of being very, very negative about Keir Starmer. And it got me thinking, you know, could this affect the next election? I kind of brushed it off before. I always thought that, you know, a lot of people leaving Labour to go vote Green, you know, Labour will still win the big cities. That's not where the fight is being held, really. But if it keeps going this way, it could have an effect. And I started looking into certain constituencies, and I actually found out, looking into my very own constituency, I need to change those wipers, they're terrible. My own constituency here in Brighton, Kemp Town, is kind of the perfect example of what can happen when a lot of Labour votes shift over to the Greens. Now, in 2015, Kemp Town, Brighton constituency was won by the Tories. And if you look, sorry, I'm driving, but the stats are on screen. I think it's around 2,000 people voted for the Greens. And if those votes went over to Labour, they would have won that seat. So there's a perfect example of a Tory seat being won because a lot of Labour voters crossed over to the Greens. Now, interestingly, what happened in 2017 is Labour and the Greens struck up a deal where the Greens didn't run a candidate in Kemp Town, Brighton. And if you look at the result, all those Green votes went over to Labour and they won that seat. The most interesting thing about that vote, though, is if you notice, there was about 4,000, I think it's about 4,000 people voted for UKIP in 2015. And those people must have crossed over to Labour as well, because the Tories count, it's roughly about 18,000 on both votes. So nothing really changed there. But what's really interesting is that Labour enticed UKIP voters over in the 2017 election. Labour were for a second referendum, if I believe rightly. So they enticed UKIP voters, UKIP being one single issue party that wants a referendum and wants UK out of the EU. And they crossed over to Labour in 2017 that wanted a second referendum. That kind of shows the public opinion, doesn't it? Even in those few years, I think a lot of people that voted UKIP regretted it and thought, actually, maybe we should have a second referendum. Interesting. Anyway, aside from that, the deal was struck up. Labour didn't field a candidate in Brighton Central, Caroline Lucas's constituency, and the vice versa on the other side. And I don't understand why the three progressive parties, if you call it that, I don't know whether you can, Labour, Lib Dems and Greens, are not doing more of this sort of thing where they're helping each other out. I think the seat that the Greens have always been after as well at Brighton for a long time is Bristol, isn't it? You know, can they not strike up a deal with Labour where Labour dog out of that one and then the Greens help them out in another one? And the same with the Lib Dems. I don't know why this is not done more often. As far as I know, Labour are fielding a candidate this year in Brighton Pavilion, in Eddie Izzard. I don't know whether they feel that they can win that seat because Caroline Lucas is dropping out. She's not going to be running for election. But it just seems to make sense to keep that going. That worked kind of well in those elections, and I could have a situation where I can't even vote Green in Brighton Kemp Town. If there's not a Green candidate, I'll have the choice between Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems, or Reform, or whatever UKIP garbage they pump out. So I mean, I'm going to be voting Labour, aren't I? I think so. But it is interesting how I want to dive in when I'm at home on my computer. I'll probably do a more full-length video into this, but I want to dive into a few of these constituencies. It looks like 2015 was probably one of the largest Labour voting Green voting years. It'd be interesting to dive into a few of these constituencies and see how much damage against Labour the Greens can do. I get both sides of this argument. On the previous video that I had, you know, I had a lot of comments saying, oh, okay, you know, what do you want? Another 5 years of the Tories. Stop damning Starmer. You're going to get another 5 years of the Tories. Why would you vote Green? There's only two choices. You have to vote blue or red. And you know what? When you scale it back to the brass tacks of things, when you take away all the fluff and just put it back to its simplest form, if you want to get rid of the Tories, voting Labour is the most efficient way of doing that. But you still can't have a situation where you can't criticise the current Labour leader for things that you disagree on. And this is how progress is made. You know, if Labour feel like they are losing a hell of a lot of votes to the Greens because there is public opinion and people are making their voices heard, then they might shift policy further in that direction. I think it's silly to not be able to damning anyone that criticises Keir Starmer because, you know, we have to get rid of the Tories. I mean, how far does this go? Is the man allowed to, you know, like, go out on Oxford Street and murder someone? Oh, well, he's not the Tories, we'll still vote for him. I mean, you can't. How far does it go? I think criticism of Starmer, however you end up voting, is still really important to form what sort of Labour Party will be put up for the election next year. What's your thoughts, guys? Please put your thoughts down in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from you. If you enjoyed the video, plonk a like, and if you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe up there. There'll be another video up top. I'll probably put that Steve Coogan one up there if you want to check that one out. Yeah, have a look at the comments of that video. I'd say 70-30 in negative comments of Keir Starmer. It's quite interesting. Till next time, take care.